Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to a special edition of APTN National News. Tonight, an in-depth look at the impacts of hydro development in northern Manitoba. A recent report reveals a culture of discrimination and harassment at the Keeyask dam site. It's the latest on a pile of reports showing decades of abuse by hydro workers working in camps near First Nations communities in northern Manitoba. Hydro development in Manitoba has been a contentious issue between Indigenous peoples and the province for decades. But disturbing allegations of physical and sexual abuse and the level of racism are just now coming to light in newly released reports. Recent testimony involved projects dating back as far as the 1960s. Now, an independent report is coming to light that found a culture of discrimination and harassment at a project currently under construction. The former Grand Chief for First Nations in northern Manitoba says it's still ongoing.
Yes, I've heard of cases where women have been attacked by workers as recently as last month, and it's disturbing. It's disturbing to know that these kind of attitudes still are affecting our people in a very negative way and putting people's lives in danger.
The Keeyask Generation Project is a multi-billion-dollar development being undertaken in a partnership by Manitoba Hydro and 4 First Nations. People who took part in a culture assessment review in 2017 spoke of their fear of retaliation for raising their concerns. But among those raised included living in jail-like conditions, with some referring to the camp as Keeyaskatres. Others are quoted as saying there's too much discrimination towards Indigenous workers. An employee who said they were called seal eater, squaw, and Pocahontas. Concerns are also raised about drugs and alcohol at the site. Manitoba Hydro says as of August 2018, 63 of the 64 recommendations in the report have been completed. The province called in the RCMP to look at earlier allegations. North wants to see an outside organization involved.
Absolutely. I think that every time that there's RCMP involvement in anything, there has to be an independent body that comes in and monitors the investigation and does the investigation. I don't think it's fair to anyone, not even to the RCMP.
A spokesperson for Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit says a decision on whether it will launch its own probe into the earlier disturbing allegations of abuse is expected this week. A committee has also been set up by the province. North would like to see a process for victims to have their voices heard in a way that makes them feel safe and secure. Those allegations are just part of the bombshell dropped by Hydro. While Manitobans depend on electricity produced in the northern part of the province, at the other end of the transmission lines is a reality few of us ever see. Ashley Branson has the story.
I have to have some kind of hope and hope for my children.
Meet Ramona Nekaway.
And I'm from a hydro-affected community.
She's a member of Nissequawayasik Cree Nation.
Focus a lot of my research on the impacts and effects of hydro and the production of hydro.
She's also an assistant professor at the University College of the North.
It isn't just about hydro, it's about the system, it's about the processes involved in generating this energy source. People, I think, who use the energy don't know that, and the environmental consequences are so great. Our people are very resilient people, and you know, they're very kind and generous and giving, and in spite of all of this. So the guy that was tying the boat, that's my uncle. Oh, okay.
Nekaway's mother lived her entire life without hydro development until the 1970s, when the construction of the Churchill River diversion began, making Nekaway a second-generation hydro-impacted Cree. She says she wants her kids and her grandchild to know not just the impacts, but the significance water has in their culture.
The land and the water is so important. This water, like, to the very core of me, I feel like it's so integral to who we are. It's been a big part of our history.
She explains the rivers helped connect different communities.
These were our highways, and so they were very important, and they are very important. And our kids need to know why they were, why they are, and why they continue to be important.
We'll visit Grand Rapids today and drive the rest of the way to Norway House overnight.
Nekaway is part of an alliance of university researchers, community members, and non-governmental organizations. They're called Winiskatan.
So Winiskatan is Cree, and so it means wake up, you know, to awaken or to rise up.
And that's exactly what they want to do. Awaken people across the province and bring attention to the devastating impacts hydro development has on these northern communities. Winiskatan is ready to begin their annual tour of northern Cree nations. Their first stop is Mississippi Cree Nation, over 400 kilometers north of Winnipeg. Elder Gerald McKay greets the alliance with a meal of freshly caught fish. He shares stories about how hydro took over their community in the 60s by bringing in outsiders.
There was probably 5,000 strangers here, and a lot of them weren't working. And so at nighttime there would be a lot of action at night. Like people would steal the clothes, like go off the clothesline and stuff like that.
Members of Mississippi experienced racism and inequality.
When we were kids, like, we weren't allowed on the bus here. Like, we used to have to walk from here. When I was 6 years old, I started walking from here to the school. And because the bus wouldn't pick us up, it was only for hydro kids. And then that bus would go by us. Like, sometimes it was only half full. We're just going to go around this point. We'll come out right where we went in there. It's just a big circle.
McKay drives us through his community.
Yeah, it's basically just
and shows the difference between local First Nations and hydro housing. Yeah. He points something out to us that most people could easily miss.
There's 2 meters right here, look. To the right. Oh, yeah. One house, 2 meters.
He says the company pays for those workers' hydro, but that's not the case for the locals.
We're all basically struggling to pay our hydro bills. My lowest hydro bill is about $70 a month in the summer, and my highest is about $400.
Some community members recall the promise of free hydro during the time of the Northern Flood Agreement in the 70s, but that never happened.
Well, you know, it's the same as everything else, like the treaties. They're just words. You know, there's no, they don't mean it when they say stuff like that.
The construction of the Grand Rapids generating station was completed in 1968, but this is just the first of what will become a large network of dams that would alter the waters and land of Treaty 5 territory and the lives of those living here.
In some of our communities, the access to the land and the water has been deeply impacted by the production of electricity. So we're unable, in some cases, to go out there and to experience the land and to get the teachings and benefit from that experience out in the land.
Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Mississippi Cree Nation.
Time for a quick break, but stay tuned. We'll be back with more on the impacts of hydro development in northern Manitoba. Welcome back. For many northern Cree communities in Manitoba, fishing, hunting, and trapping are their livelihood. Ashley Branson speaks with some residents of Norway House in Gillam, and they tell her how the hydro dams have impacted their way of life.
Yeah, it has altered our way of life. It's altered everything.
Chris Clark is the president of Norway House Fishermen's Co-op, located over 300 kilometers north of Mississippi Cree Nation. Due to the fluctuating water levels caused by hydro dams, Clark says the erosion and sediment buildup on the lakes affects their livelihood.
You know, we have to live with these changes every day, day in, day out, while we're out here trying to make a living, providing for families, whether it be trapping or fishing, you know.
By the 1960s, Manitoba Hydro and the provincial government recognized the vast potential of hydro development in the north to power the south and profit from exported energy. In the 70s, they diverted rivers, blasted new channels, and in some cases even completely reversed the flow of rivers. The Churchill River diversion maximized the flow of water into the Nelson River, while the Lake Winnipeg regulation turned one of the world's largest freshwater lakes into a massive reservoir. All of this was done with little regard for the people and communities that lived and depended on these waters.
We always were told that things will be different. Mother Nature will regenerate itself, but it can't the way it is.
Norway House band councillor Langford Saunders says despite the devastation to their waters, fishermen still find a way to make a living in the fisheries.
We fish in the fall on Playground Lake, and also we fish in Lake Winnipeg.
Saunders says commercial fishing is at its lowest point. He explains they used to produce nearly 300,000 kilograms of whitefish and pickerel from Playgreen Lake.
Since the diversion project happened, as time went on, things have gotten worse. And to date, we have only about 115,000 kilograms to harvest on Playgreen Lake.
But he says it's been nearly 15 years since they met that quota. As the years go on, Chris Clark says the fishing quota changes every year.
Every year is different when you depend on Mother Nature. Like farming, you have some good years, some bad years, and same thing with the lake. But you know, but it is a known fact that the lakes are dying. Not only Playgreen Lake, Lake Winnipeg is dying too.
We asked Clark if Manitoba Hydro or the provincial government could do anything to compensate these communities.
No dollar value will ever address the damage and the destruction that has occurred. But in reality, we have to try to help the lake and the land, you know.
APTN received an email statement from Manitoba Hydro's media relations officer. It states, "We continue to address the adverse effects of our existing operations on the customs, practices, and traditions of Indigenous people integral to their cultural identity." But Langford Saunders feels communities are still not being heard.
We need to sit down. We need to come and talk about the issues together.
Next, we follow Ramona Nekaway and Winiskatan, nearly 600 kilometers from Norway House to Gillam.
I like that, but no river on Skidoo, or I come up here too. I got roads all over.
Elder Noah Massan takes us on his trap line.
I used to have a road through this bush here.
He says this provided a living for him and his family for decades.
But my trap line destroyed forever.
Now it's the site for the latest dam, Keeyask, which began construction in 2014. Massan says the development destroyed his trap line and drove the animals away.
I had mutton boxes all along the road in those trees. I never got nothing. And here Hydro say, oh, animals will come back. 1 year we won't see them. I haven't seen a truck here.
Massan shows us the construction of the Keeyask Dam when he's confronted by a worker.
You're not supposed to be touring around.
They didn't say, hey, come here.
Angry. I'm just saying it's dangerous.
I know. They never said nothing, but they told me get a flag and a thing. But I'm not going all over the place. We're just going as far as here.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, if you want to come in, it's one thing. You should always stop at the office and let us know.
I don't know what office you guys got.
Just right beside
Massan can't visit his trapline without informing Hydro.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
He receives a small amount of compensation for the loss of the animals he once hunted here. Sadie Phoenix Lavoie joins Ramona Nekaway on Winiskatan's annual Hydro Tour. She's the community coordinator for the Alliance. Lavoie is from another hydro-impacted community, Saging First Nation. And this is her first time on this Hydro Tour.
A lot of these communities used to be self-sustaining in that way, hunting, fishing, trapping, and their trap lines having to be flooded out, or they have complete transmission lines going through them. The animals and the fish are moving further and further away from their community.
Lavoie simply states Hydro is responsible for the damage.
That's our livelihood, that's our culture, that's how we identify ourselves to be Indigenous and our connection to the environment, and Hydro has really severed that.
Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Gillam.
After the break, we'll pick up this series on the impact of hydro development in the Titasqueyak Cree Nation. Welcome back. For decades, hydro development has wreaked havoc on northern Cree communities, culturally, socially, and economically. But community members are speaking out. They share how the developments have affected the environment. Ashley Branson has the story.
This was land. This is land. A lot of it is gone.
Nearly 200 kilometers away from Gillam, we arrive at Titasqueyak Cree Nation. We meet Douglas Keeyask. He's one of the community members that's volunteered to take us out in boats. It's hard not to notice how murky the water is. Keeyask says the fluctuating water levels controlled by Manitoba Hydro continue to erode the shorelines.
We found other remains going down to the water, and after we marked them GPS, and then we continue a little further up the shore. That's when we found that skull. We knew what it was right away. So these remains were found right on the shore.
This summer he found human remains by his cabin, and it wasn't the first time. He says the bones of his ancestors continue to wash up along the shorelines.
He went paddling out. Couldn't reach the ground. He fell overboard. He couldn't reach the ground.
A few years ago, Keeyask's cousin fell through the ice and died. He says the water and ice are no longer predictable.
He was still alive when he got here, when you pulled him out of the water. He died of hypothermia here after. Yeah. So that caused through the high water going up and down. I don't know, he could have probably made it if the water was low. Could have walked to that other island, because it was only a few yards from them. But that cold got him, ice.
This was probably one of the first times I think that I'd seen clear water. So my mom grew up in pre-CRD, so I was born into this post-CRD Churchill River diversion.
Ramona Nekaway is visiting Cree communities with Winiskatan, an alliance of university researchers, non-governmental organizations, and community members. They're speaking out on the devastation hydro development has created in the region. She's from Nisatchewaysik Cree Nation, but sees how half a century of hydro dams has impacted most communities in northern Manitoba.
You know, at that point, at the way we're going, that would even concern me, because attached to this water is a way of life. And so if our children are unable to practice that way of life that sort of coincides with the environment and the water.
Neckaway brings the group to Troy Lake. This lake is one of the few accessible, clear, and pristine bodies of water in the Treaty 5 territory that has not been sacrificed for power, and what the water looked like before the Churchill River diversion.
And I thought it was important just to give folks an idea of what they have been and will probably continue to hear about in terms of the beauty of the land and of the water and how clear and pristine it was.
Just over 350 kilometers away, in Opipanapuwin Cree Nation at South Indian Lake, things are no better. In the 1960s, families were forced out of their homes to make way for the flooding.
They were given a couple $100, I forget how much, but it wasn't very much, to burn their house and move across. Quite a few of them didn't. Some instances there, CMP had to come and take the people out because they didn't want to move. Eh?
According to the Northern Flood Agreement, it states, Manitoba shall have regard to minimizing the destruction of wildlife by controlling the water levels and flows to the extent that's practical to do so. But when you look at the land and water, it looks like maximum destruction. Steve Ducharme is a fisherman in the area. He doesn't hold back when describing the impacts hydro development has on his community.
The Manitoba government and Manitoba Hydro have succeeded what the church and the federal government have been unable to do for the last 500 years. You know, it is the total economic, cultural, and social genocide of a people. That's what happened. Literally what happened, because their culture is gone, their way of, they can't live off the land anymore because it's been totally destroyed.
Ducharme adds,
kids have no place to play. They're stuck in that town, get into trouble, all kinds of mischief and that. And the adults, well, there's no work, and fishing has been almost wiped out. So there's really nothing left. And prior to the flood, it was a self-supporting community. They didn't want any help from the government. They didn't get any help from the government.
Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Opipanapuwin Cree Nation.
That's all we have for you in this special edition of APTN National News. Join us again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern and Mountain Time. We'll see you then.